Right now, a football club somewhere in the world is celebrating, lifting trophies, selling out stadiums, signing the best players on the planet, and they have absolutely no idea they are already dead. The collapse has already started. The countdown is already running. They just cannot see it yet because no dynasty ever does. But there was a civilization that saw it coming, mapped it out in precise detail, and then ignored every single warning until the whole thing burned to the ground. That civilization was Rome. And what happened to Rome is happening right now to the club you think is untouchable. Your brain loves a dynasty. It loves the certainty of knowing who the best is. It loves the ritual of watching a team win again and again and again. There is something almost religious about a dominant club, the same crests, the same colors, the same sense that this is just how things are. But history has a rule that no dynasty has ever broken. Not one. And the Romans, of all people, figured it out first. Here is what they found. Power does not decay from the outside. It rots from the inside. And by the time anyone notices the rot, it is already too late to stop it. The Roman Empire at its peak was not just dominant, it was incomprehensible in its dominance. Under Emperor Trajan, around 117 AD, Rome controlled nearly 5 million square kilometers of territory. It had the best roads, the best army, the best legal system, the best supply chains in the ancient world. Other civilizations did not compete with Rome. They simply existed near it, hoping not to be absorbed. Sound familiar? Because if you swap the word Rome for the name of any football superclub of the last 30 years, the sentence barely changes. The historian Edward Gibbon spent his life studying how Rome fell. In 1776, he published a work that still rattles historians today. His central finding was not that Rome was destroyed by barbarians. His central finding was that Rome destroyed itself, slowly, invisibly, and almost voluntarily. The external enemies were real, but they only won because Rome had already hollowed itself out from within. Now think about the last great football dynasty you watched collapse, not lose a final, not have a bad season. Actually collapse, where within 3 or 4 years of their peak, the whole thing caved in. The players aged together. The tactics became predictable. The board kept spending on the wrong things. The manager who built the dynasty became the biggest obstacle to its evolution. The club that once signed hungry young players started signing big-name veterans chasing one last payday. Does that sound like a coincidence, or does it sound like a pattern? Because Rome did every single one of those things, in order, on a slightly longer timescale. The Roman political scientist Polybius, writing over a century before the birth of Christ, described something he called anacyclosis. It is the theory that all great powers move through a fixed cycle, from strength to prosperity, from prosperity to complacency, from complacency to corruption, from corruption to collapse. And then, if something survives the collapse, back to strength again. Polybius believed this cycle was not random. He believed it was the natural, inevitable consequence of what success does to a system. And he was not describing Rome. He was describing every dominant power that had ever existed before Rome. He was giving Rome a warning it ultimately failed to heed. Football clubs are not empires, but the mechanism is identical. When a club starts winning, it attracts resources. Better players, better coaches, better facilities, more money. That resource advantage makes it easier to keep winning. Early victories compound. The gap between the dynasty and its rivals widens. And this is exactly when the invisible rot begins, because success creates comfort, and comfort is the enemy of hunger. The Roman legions that conquered Gaul were lean, disciplined, and had something to prove. The legions that guarded Rome 400 years later were bloated, underpaid, and increasingly staffed by the very people Rome had once conquered. The hunger was gone. And when hunger goes, everything else follows eventually. The psychologist Carol Dweck at Stanford University spent decades researching what she called the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. Her research, published across dozens of studies from the 1980s onwards, found that individuals and organizations who believe their success is a product of their innate superiority stop doing the things that made them successful in the first place. They start protecting what they have instead of building what they need. They become risk-averse exactly when risk is what built them. Football clubs in the peak of their dynasty do this constantly. They stop developing youth. They start managing reputation. They confuse the memory of dominance with dominance itself. Think about what happened to Ajax in the mid-1990s. The 1995 Champions League winning side was a masterpiece. Young, fluid, collectively brilliant. Within 2 years, the core of that squad had been sold. Kluivert, Davids, Seedorf, the De Boer brothers, Litmanen. The machine that produced them kept running, but the club at the top had already shifted its identity from developer to seller. The dynasty collapsed not because of a single catastrophic failure, but because of a slow, structural erosion of what made it work. Rome lost Britain, then Gaul, then Spain, not all at once, but one province at a time, over generations, while everyone at the center kept insisting the empire was fine. There is another Roman pattern that football mirrors almost perfectly, and it is the one that historians find most haunting. The Romans called it the problem of the successors. When a great leader, whether emperor or general, achieved something extraordinary, the institutions built around them began to optimize for that specific leader rather than for the mission. When the leader was gone, the institution had no idea how to function without them. Augustus built an empire. The men who followed him spent 2 centuries arguing about who got to sit in his chair. Sir Alex Ferguson built Manchester United into the most dominant English club in history. The men who followed him spent a decade arguing about who got to sit in his chair. The pattern is not a coincidence. It is a law. The Ibn Khaldun angle is the one that should make every football executive deeply uncomfortable. Ibn Khaldun was a 14th century North African scholar, a historian, sociologist, and economist centuries before those words existed. He developed a theory he called asabiyyah, which translates roughly as group solidarity or collective will. His argument was that dynasties are born from groups with ferocious solidarity, a shared hunger, a shared identity, a shared sense of purpose that overrides individual interest. This solidarity is what allows the group to conquer, but conquest brings wealth, and wealth dissolves solidarity. The winners become comfortable individuals instead of a hungry collective. And then the next hungry collective, from the outside, with nothing to lose, comes and takes everything. He was writing about civilizations, but he might as well have been writing about football clubs in their third decade of dominance. The dressing room that once had 15 players, all desperate to prove themselves, becomes a dressing room of 15 players protecting their contracts and their commercial deals. The spirit does not disappear dramatically. It evaporates, quietly, slowly, invisibly, until one day you look at the squad and realize the hunger is simply not there anymore, and you cannot buy hunger in the transfer market. This is what Rome could not solve. It tried. Emperors attempted reforms. Generals attempted purges. Administrators attempted new taxation systems. But you cannot legislate hunger back into a system that has been full for too long. You cannot manufacture the desperation of a challenger from within the structures of a champion. Every great football dynasty has had a hunger window, a period, usually between 3 and 8 years, when the core of the squad still remembered what it felt like to have nothing, when the collective will was stronger than any individual ego, when the system was still lean enough to move fast. Barcelona between 2008 and 2011, Real Madrid between 2015 and 2018, Bayern Munich between 2012 and 2014, Liverpool between 2018 and 2020. Each of these dynasties had a peak that was genuinely historic. Each of them began to decline not when the money ran out, not when the rivals improved, but when the hunger window closed. Rome's hunger window closed somewhere in the 2nd century AD. For a while, the momentum of previous greatness carried everything forward. The roads still worked. The army still won. The legal system still functioned. But the engine that had built all of it, the ferocious, desperate, collective will of a city that believed it had a destiny to fulfill, was already gone. What remained was the infrastructure of greatness without the spirit that built it. The fall, when it came, did not look like a fall from the inside. It looked like a series of manageable problems. A barbarian incursion here, a financial crisis there, a succession dispute in the capital. Each problem was handled, or partially handled, or deferred. The empire kept functioning, technically, for another 2 centuries after the spirit had left it. Football dynasties do the same thing. They keep winning games, occasionally winning trophies, spending enormous sums of money, technically functioning, while the thing that made them a dynasty is already gone. You have watched this happen. You have sat in front of a screen or in a stadium and felt the moment when a great club stopped feeling like a dynasty and started feeling like a very expensive, very complicated, very hollow version of itself. You felt it before you could explain it. Your instincts recognized the pattern even if your words could not name it. That feeling was not pessimism, it was pattern recognition. The same pattern that Polybius described, the same pattern that Gibbon catalogued, the same pattern that Ibn Khaldun theorized, the same pattern that has played out in every dominant civilization, every dominant empire, every dominant institution in human history. Football did not invent this pattern. Football inherited it. And until clubs find a way to do what Rome never could, to voluntarily rebuild the hunger before the collapse forces it, the dynasties will keep rising, peaking, hollowing out and falling. Exactly on schedule. Exactly as predicted. 2,000 years before the first whistle was ever blown. Tonight, somewhere in the world, a football dynasty is dying. You already know which one, and now you know why.